I'm Claire Madison, and if you'd asked me 5 years ago what I thought it meant to wear the uniform, I'd have said honor. Now, I know better. The Army taught me discipline. My family taught me silence. Both tried to teach me where I belonged, just far enough behind my brother Ryan to stay out of frame. I spent years doing everything right, rising early, saluting first, earning every stripe with grit and blood, while the spotlight stayed glued to someone else's shoulders. Then came the orders, the file, the name buried inside a redacted report. Ryan's name. That was the moment I stopped serving in silence. Before I walk you through how I pulled back the curtain on a decorated fraud, hit that like button if you've ever been told to stay in your place. Leave a comment if someone ever stole your credit and smiled doing it, because today we're not just talking about the military, we're talking about power. Who gets it? Who keeps it? And what happens when someone finally calls it out? And it starts in a spotless kitchen with lemon-scented silence and a certificate no one ever saw. At dinner, Ryan made his announcement between bites of roast chicken and green beans. "They called today," he said, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "Said they want me to interview early. I'm thinking of going full Army, not just ROTC." "Oh, honey," Mom gasped, hands clasped like he'd just won a medal. "You look so sharp in uniform." Dad grunted his approval. "Damn straight, that's a man's path." Ryan's smile widened. "Might even aim for West Point." The room pulsed with energy. A spark of something tribal lit in my mother's eyes. My father nodded, pride swelling visibly in his chest. I waited for someone to ask how my day was, or if they'd seen the certificate on the counter, or if I'd thought of any paths. No one did. After dinner, I retreated to my room. I sat on the floor beside the heating vent, the certificate still folded in my lap. The family wall of fame was just down the hall. Framed photos of Ryan in various stages of glory. Little League MVP, debate champion, summer ROTC cadet of the month. I wasn't on the wall. I never had been. Voices drifted in from the kitchen. "He's got such natural leadership," Dad said. "You can't teach that." "He's destined," Mom replied, her voice dreamy. "Claire's bright, but Ryan was born for this." I stared at the certificate until the words blurred. Then I folded it in half, then again, once more until it was nothing but a stiff square. I walked to the bathroom and flushed it. The water gurgled like it was swallowing something bigger than paper. Later that night, the hallway light leaked under my door in a soft yellow glow. I didn't look up when I heard the creak of floorboards, but I knew it was Ryan. His footsteps slowed, then stopped. "You shouldn't take it personally, kid," he said, voice casual, like this was about spilled milk. "Some of us are just born to lead." I didn't answer. I didn't move. When the silence thickened, his footsteps resumed, fading down the hall until all I could hear was the thud of my own pulse. I pulled the sealed envelope from my desk drawer and stared at my name written in blocky letters. Inside was my ROTC application, already signed. I slid it beneath the mattress, the corner catching for a moment on the bed spring before disappearing into the shadows. Let them look away, not going to. When I received my first stripe, no one in my family asked what it meant. But they knew, when Ryan got promoted. The locker room smelled like salt and steel and damp cloth. The walls were painted regulation gray, and no one raised their voice above a murmur. I stared at my reflection in the scratched metal of my locker door, fingers brushing over the new stripe sewn on my sleeve. Precise, proud, barely noticeable to the untrained eye. It had taken me 14 weeks, 6 stress fractures, and 1 dislocated shoulder to earn it. The commendation came that morning after a final field exercise that left half the platoon limping or passed out cold. I didn't limp. I stood through the debrief, helmet tucked under one arm, jaw clenched, refusing to let the sweat streaming down my spine distract me from the colonel's eyes when he handed me the slip. "Outstanding resolve, Madison," he'd said. "You executed protocol under fire better than most of the men." A tight nod. I'd muttered, "Thank you, sir," and tucked the commendation into my pocket like it was an overdue receipt. Now, back in the dorm, I pulled out my phone. Slim bars. I hit Mom. She answered after the 3rd ring. Clattering dishes, laughter in the background. "Claire! Hang on, can you speak up? Ryan's got a few friends over. They're celebrating. He just got tapped for squad lead rotation." "I know," I said. "He posted it." The pause that followed wasn't long, but it was sharp.
"Well, isn't that exciting? They said he's one of the youngest in the unit to— Mom."
I could almost hear her frown. "Yes, hun? I got promoted today." Silence. Then, vaguely, "Oh, that's nice, sweetie. Ryan, tell Claire what Sergeant Bennett said about you." A voice cut through the static, bright with amusement. "Claire, probably typing up supply forms somewhere." Another round of laughter. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. I hung up before the knot in my throat got too tight to swallow. Outside, the evening air was cool, the kind of soft chill that settled into your collarbones and made you feel alone in a way the barracks never could. A unit marched across the training field in loose formation, boots stomping in rhythmic defiance. At their head, a woman maybe 5 years older than me raised her hand in salute. They returned it in unison. I watched, arms folded across my chest. No emotion, just the low hum of something ancient tightening behind my ribs. Footsteps approached behind me. I didn't turn. "Madison," came a voice, steady, clipped. "Lieutenant Colonel Green." "Yes, sir?" He stood beside me, hands in his jacket pockets. "You're better than your file says." I didn't answer. "Keep working like this. They'll notice." The wind rustled the flags above the admin building. I didn't look at him when I said, "They already don't," so I stopped needing them to. He raised an eyebrow, just barely, but said nothing. He didn't need to. He walked off, leaving me standing there as the sky dimmed to gray and the stars blinked on, indifferent and exact. I ran my fingers over the seam of the new stripe again, this time not for comfort, but for confirmation. No cheers, no barbecues, just skin, thread, bone, and the quiet weight of earning it. They took 53 photos at my brother's promotion ceremony. I was in none of them, even though I stood in the front row. The Texas sun beat down without mercy, glinting off polished brass and freshly ironed dress blues. The courtyard at Fort Hood was a sea of decorum, straight rows of folding chairs, flags fluttering in the dry breeze, and the kind of performative patriotism that smelled like starch and sunscreen. Soldiers stood at attention, eyes shaded under crisp brims, while civilians squinted through sunglasses and clutched programs embossed with Ryan's name. I stood in uniform, just left of center. Not beside my parents, that space was already occupied. My father hovered near the podium. Ryan stepped forward with that easy swagger, shaking hands with his commanding officer before turning toward the small sea of spectators. He smiled wide, movie star wide, and raised one hand in a mock salute to the assembled press. Then the MC made an announcement. "We're honored today to also have members of Fort Hood support staff present. Please acknowledge Captain Madison. Claire, I believe. I blinked. Support staff. The words hung there, lacquered in politeness, neutered of identity. The photographer's lens swung toward me. I held position, no expression. My name, my rank, my presence, erased and rewritten in real time. Ryan leaned slightly toward a nearby reporter, chuckling just loud enough. She's the reason our pencils are always sharpened. The crowd laughed, a ripple of indulgent amusement. A moment. A moment I did not react to. Flashbulbs popped. I heard the click, click, click of multiple shutters, all converging on my brother's grin.
None on the woman in uniform beside him.
Later, during the reception, I poured myself a half glass of water and stood near the outer edge of the gathering. Mom passed by once, patting my shoulder without stopping. Dad didn't speak to me at all. He was too busy recounting Ryan's accomplishments to some officer's wife, his voice puffed with pride. Ryan posed for photos in the center like a man born to be there. Then someone tapped my arm. "You're Claire Madison?" The photographer, civilian, buzz cut, clipboard in hand. "Yes." My voice was steady. "Sorry, I just need the full rank for our caption database." "Captain Claire Madison." He scribbled it down. "Great. Can I?" I was already walking away. The sky dimmed into a dusty blue by the time the crowd began to disperse. I helped fold chairs. No one noticed. When I left, no one called out a goodbye. Back in my quarters, I opened my inbox and found the event summary already waiting. Attached were the official photos, neatly labeled. I clicked through the album. Ryan with our parents. Ryan with his CO. Ryan laughing with a cluster of junior officers. I wasn't in a single frame, not even blurred in the background. Then I opened the summary file. At the bottom of the press caption, "In attendance, Captain Clarence Madison, Support Officer." Clarence. I stared at the word until it lost meaning, until the letters felt foreign. My hand hovered over the keyboard, itching to correct it, but I didn't. I closed the file, leaned back, and let the silence swell around me. Some shadows don't need sunlight to grow. They expand just fine on their own. When Derek bled out in my arms, I realized medals can't make up for silence, and silence is what my family gave me. The sand outside Kunduz clung to everything: boots, skin, the creases in our gear. We'd been out for 6 hours, patrolling a strip of terrain littered with twisted metal and the bones of unfinished buildings. The radio hissed now and then with static, but no chatter. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't last. "Captain," Sergeant Lynn murmured, his eyes sweeping the horizon. "Heat signatures behind the ridge, 5 o'clock. I nodded once and motioned for the unit to shift formation. "More, stay tight, don't drift," I called, voice low but firm. PFC Derek Moore grinned, despite the sweat streaking his face. "Aye, Captain, shadow mode engaged." We were half a mile from the extraction point when it happened. One sharp crack, then another. Gunfire, sharp and sudden. From the side. We hit the dirt. Return fire cracked back across the ravine as sand exploded around us. I crawled behind cover, barked into the comm. "Ambush, mark coordinates, call it in now." A scream tore through the commotion. "More!" someone shouted. I didn't hesitate. I moved. He was down, chest rising and falling in erratic spurts, blood blooming beneath the tan of his flak. I dropped beside him, pressed down hard, hands slick and trembling. "You're good, Derek. You're okay. We've got you," I said. He blinked up at me, eyes glassy. Cap, he whispered, did I do it right? You held the line, I said, biting down hard on the tremor in my voice. You did everything right. By the time the med evac arrived, he was gone. The rest of the patrol made it back. One sprained ankle, a broken comm, and a dead 20-year-old kid who used to sneak Pop-Tarts into morning briefings. That night, I stood beside his mother as taps played under a darkening sky. Her hands were cold in mine. She didn't cry until the final note fell away. Later, back on base, I changed into my full dress and sat alone in the chapel. The overhead lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across empty pews. I held Derek's nameplate in my lap, thumb brushing over the engraved letters like I could bring them back. I called home. For once, Dad picked up.
Hey.
I said, voice tight. We lost a man today. Derek Moore. He was one of mine. A pause.
Then, Ryan lost a buddy in training once. It happens. Silence bloomed between us like a bruise. I let it spread. Then I hung up. There was no point in explaining what it meant to watch someone die because your timing was off by 5 seconds. No point in describing the weight of leadership when it crushes. I returned to my quarters, changed back into fatigues, and opened the leather-bound notebook I kept hidden beneath a stack of mission reports. The one I started years ago but never finished. The one with only a title scratched in pen across the first page. Reasons I wear the uniform. I flipped to a clean page, wrote, "To be seen, if not by them, then by those who serve under me." The ink bled a little at the edges, but I didn't stop. That night I didn't sleep. I sat with Derek's nameplate, the soft hum of the bass generators outside and a silence that no metal could ever outshine. I saw my name on the roster today. Only it wasn't mine. They'd replaced Captain Madison with Captain Clipboard. The laminated duty board at Fort Sterling's West Wing glared under flickering fluorescent lights, each plastic slip lined with names and roles. Claire's index finger hovered over the list, tracing down until she found it. Captain Clipboard, Logistics Oversight. The handwriting was neat, but the insult was unmistakable. She didn't need to guess who coined it. Back in her bunk room, the jokes followed her. Screenshots forwarded by Monroe lit up her inbox. Memes circulating through unofficial channels. Captioned photos of her from drills with captions like, "Strategic Paperweight, now in HD." Claire scrolled through each one with the same expressionless detachment she used when filing body reports. One post featured a clip from Ryan's podcast, the episode that had gone semi-viral 6 months ago. His voice, all smooth confidence and smug charm. My sister, oh, she's doing great, collecting ribbons for admin excellence. paper pushing is a noble calling.
The crowd laughed. The forums didn't forget. Sergeant Monroe tapped her doorframe. You saw it, huh? Claire nodded. He stepped in, shutting the door with a quiet thud. It's Ryan. He's always been good at making people laugh at the wrong things. She looked up, expression still flat. It's not just laughter. It's strategic now. A knock came next. Not a soldier's, not cautious. It was Elijah Price. He hadn't changed much since their paths crossed at Fort Grant. Same intensity in his eyes, same purposeful stillness. I got reassigned because of him, he said by way of greeting. Claire leaned back. And you just came here to say that? No, Elijah said, stepping inside. I kept the files. He pulled a flash drive from his jacket, set it on her desk like a weapon. Surveillance footage, Fort Grant, March 2020, the one they said never existed. Claire didn't touch it yet. What's on it? Watch and decide, but I'll tell you this. Lieutenant Hawk signed off on the deletion request, then pretended he never saw it. Claire reached out, finally, and took the flash drive. Her laptop was old, the kind that hummed like a microwave when pushed. She inserted the drive. A folder popped up. Ghost Grant. Inside, a string of numbered video files and one PDF titled Request Log, Redacted Orders. She clicked the first video. The timestamp read Circle 14th, 2020, 21:43. The footage flickered, grainy black and white. A hallway. Ryan entered from the left, laughing with two other men. A soldier passed by, stiff and alert. Ryan turned toward him, spoke. The audio was off, but the tension was visible. Then Ryan shoved the soldier, just slightly, but enough. Claire froze the frame, zoomed in. It was Elijah. "You never reported this?" she asked. He shook his head. "Didn't have time. The next day I was off the base, reassigned, no appeal." Claire sat back, pulse thick in her ears. "And now you're here."
I figured if anyone would do something, it'd be you.
She didn't reply, just stared at the still image. Ryan's mouth mid-smirk, one hand pressing a man back by the shoulder. A subtle power play, captured on a camera no one was supposed to remember. Her laptop chimed. New email. Subject: Reassignment approved. Captain Claire Madison. Makeshift immediately. Trimmed. Fort Sterling. Provost Office. Internal Investigations Unit. Claire read the lines twice, then once more. She looked back at Elijah, then at Monroe, who had remained silent but still as steel. Outside, soldiers marched past the windows in practice cadence. Claire stood. "I'm not done being invisible," she said quietly. "I'm just getting harder to erase." People think the military buries its ghosts in coffins. They're wrong. It buries them in files labeled confidential. The records room in Fort Sterling's Internal Affairs building smelled like stale air and secrets. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and filing cabinets lined the walls like tombstones, each drawer locked. Each label a silent story, unauthorized engagements, witness logs, disciplinary reports. Claire stood alone, the badge on her uniform colder than usual. She'd only been reassigned 3 days, but she already knew this. Power in the Army didn't always come from rank. Sometimes it came from what you could dig up. Her fingers slid along a drawer until she found the one tagged Fort Grant, 2019-2020. She pulled it open with both hands. Resistance gave way to a harsh metallic shriek. Inside, dozens of folders, each thick with accusations, denials, outcomes. She flipped through them slowly, searching not for names but for patterns. Elijah had said to look for formatting, the details the careless censors always forgot. And there it was. 3 different incident reports, spread over 6 months, each supposedly filed by different officers. Had the same font, same spacing, same odd use of an end dash instead of a hyphen. All 3 redacted in the same blocky style, with the same generic reason: personnel conduct, resolved internally. She jotted the reference codes in a notebook, then pushed open the adjacent cabinet. Behind its labeled files, a thin metal panel was slightly misaligned. Claire pressed it, and the wall clicked open to reveal a locked drive. She didn't have the clearance, but she had Elijah. Back in her temporary office, Elijah was waiting, sipping weak coffee like it offended him personally. He looked up when she entered, eyes narrowing. You found it. I found something, she corrected, setting the notebook beside him. Same edits, same phrases, even the same misspelled word. Accommodate. 3 different authors, 1 lazy ghostwriter. Elijah flipped through the notes, whistled low.
They didn't even try to hide it well. They didn't think they had to. He pulled out a slim USB drive and held it up. Backup server, room B17. Most people think it got wiped during that system purge last year. I made a mirror. Claire stared at it. You think there's more? I know there is. They snuck down during lunch hours when IA staff disappeared for reheated lasagna and gossip in the mess. Room B17 wasn't labeled. Inside, old server racks blinked red and green in no discernible rhythm. Claire plugged in the drive. Elijah navigated with the ease of someone who had done this before. There, he said, pointing to a folder named 402A. She opened it. The first page was nothing but black bars. The second had more. Names removed, entire sentences whited out, but the file paths were intact. One linked to a backup transcription, another to witness audio. Claire followed it. Voice log 402A, interview 3, transcribed, subject, Private R. Jason Delgado. Skepticism. Incident during hazing simulation. Excessive force, coercion, threats of reassignment. But there was a line underneath that chilled her. Modifications requested by Captain R. Madison. She leaned forward. The modification log showed time-stamped edits. Statements softened, terms changed. Physical contact became unintended friction. Verbal threats replaced with motivational guidance. And each line bore Ryan's digital signature. It wasn't ego. It wasn't petty sibling rivalry. It was cover-up. She printed a page and circled the metadata. The sound of a door opening behind her made her turn quickly. Lieutenant Hawk stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression smooth as a file folder. "Captain," he said, "everything in this wing falls under supervision of Lieutenant Commander Dupree. I hope you've cleared your review chain." Claire closed the file. "I have orders for independent access." "Of course," he said. "Just remember, some ghosts stay buried for a reason." She nodded once. Noted. Later, alone in her room, she decrypted more from the report. One line stood out. Statement originally detailed forced nudity and sustained exposure, edited to exclude. Claire stared at it for a long time. This wasn't just ego, she whispered. It was systemic abuse. Behind her, a shadow crossed the hallway light, Hawk again, watching. She didn't flinch, but her fingers hovered over the print command. A company ain't scare her. Not anymore. The first cut doesn't draw blood, it draws attention. And attention, when aiming right, cuts deeper than steel. The mess hall at Fort Sterling was always quieter during the late shift. The midday chaos, boots clanging, trays slamming, voices raised over jokes, had dissolved into a hush punctuated only by the dull scrape of metal spoons against trays. Fluorescent lights cast sterile halos onto the polished floors. Soldiers hunched over their phones or sat in small clusters, heads bowed like monks in contemplation. Claire sat alone near the back, stirring her untouched stew, her eyes flicking to the bulletin board just outside the hall's entrance. It had taken 2 days to craft the file, and only 1 minute to slip it into the rotation. A complaint summary, signed anonymously, typed in simple language, but the implications were nuclear. The report didn't name Ryan directly. It didn't have to. The details, dates, unit assignment, pattern of complaints,
pointed like a spotlight toward his command. She knew it wouldn't take long. 15 minutes later, a low murmur began near the coffee dispenser. A young corporal leaned in to whisper to his table. A sergeant frowned at her screen and then handed her phone across. By the time Claire slipped out the side exit, the noise had changed. It wasn't about stew or weekend rotations anymore. In the hallway, she slowed her steps. Bam. A locker door echoed against the concrete walls. The metallic crash rang out like a rifle shot. Claire's boots paused just beyond the edge of light as Ryan's voice broke through. "Who the hell thinks this is funny?" She tilted her head, listening. Inside the locker alcove, Ryan stood rigid in half-dress uniform, sleeves rolled and fists clenched. A crumpled printout of the complaint summary lay by his foot. Sergeant Monroe stood across from him, arms crossed, jaw tight. Ryan shoved the locker door again. "Tell your captain's sister she's playing a dangerous game." Monroe didn't flinch. "She's not the one slamming lockers, Major." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "You think she's clever? A few rumors don't mean a damn thing." "They do when the right people start asking questions." Claire could hear the air get thinner, tension stretching like an overstressed cable. Ryan sneered. "This isn't over." He stormed past Monroe, and when she returned to her quarters, the lights were dimmed and her laptop was still humming. She didn't bother turning it off. Instead, she checked her phone. One message. Unknown sender. "You've stirred the wrong dust." No name. No number. She stared at it for a moment, then clicked the screen off. Her fingers hovered for a second before dialing. Elijah answered on the second ring. "You saw it?" "He knows," Claire said, voice low. Then the clock just started ticking. Claire leaned back against the door, the faint sound of marching boots echoing from the quad. She didn't flinch, let him know. The first cut was never meant to bleed. It was meant to expose. Everyone wants a legacy. But sometimes, the best thing you can do with an inheritance is burn it down. Rain threaded down the narrow windows of the JAG conference room, tapping soft against the glass, as if it wanted in on the meeting. The sterile air held no memory, no warmth. The overhead lights hummed. Claire sat with her back straight, uniform sharp, eyes fixed ahead, just as she had been trained. But this wasn't a drill. This was the beginning of the end. Captain Ross, the JAG officer assigned to base legal, leaned forward slightly, hands steepled over a binder marked Confidential Review Protocol. He looked like someone who read people like he read evidence, without emotion, but never without judgment. "Let me make sure I'm understanding," he said. "You're alleging a pattern of falsified reports, witness intimidation, and command negligence, all under Major Ryan Madison's tenure?" Claire nodded once. "Yes, dating back to 2017. Ross flipped to another page. "You have statements?" "Some. Redacted. And supporting documents," Claire replied, sliding a slim folder across the table. "More importantly, a timeline, cross-referenced with reassignments, incident reports, and administrative overrides." Ross opened the folder. Charts, footnotes, even highlighted excerpts from the Fort Grant server backup. Her handiwork was precise, methodical. But Ross's expression didn't change. His neutrality was a fortress. "What's missing," he said finally, "is someone willing to testify, someone who was there. Paper trails are great, Captain, but paper burns." Claire didn't flinch. "Not all of it." The door opened quietly. Elijah stepped in without a word, nodded to Claire, and placed a sealed envelope on the table. Ross arched a brow. "What's that?" Claire opened it slowly. Inside, a deactivated security badge, scuffed edges, faded plastic. The barcode still intact. On the back, the ID number matched one assigned to Ryan Madison during his command at Fort Grant. This badge, Elijah said evenly, was scanned into the rec hall during the time of Incident 402A. The log was buried in a system cache. No drill was scheduled. No orders authorized. Ross reached for it with gloved hands, turning it under the light. The silence thickened. "Do you have proof he was inside?" "We don't need proof he was," Claire said. "We have proof he shouldn't have been. That's enough to question why records were altered the next morning. Enough to open an inquiry." Ross didn't speak for a while. The thunder outside cracked, as if the sky had finally had enough of holding back. Then he sighed. "I'll escalate a redacted complaint to command. A silent inquiry. No promises on timing. No guarantees of action." Claire nodded. Ross added, "And if this collapses, then I sink with it," she said, voice steady. He studied her. "Are you bluffing, Captain?" Claire's jaw tensed. "I'm not bluffing." The meeting ended quietly. No handshakes, just paper rustling and the soft click of the badge being sealed into evidence. Back in her quarters, Claire opened her desk drawer. Nestled under her ROTC pin and Derek Moore's nameplate was a worn folder marked Field Report, 19 October 2018. She slid it halfway out. The words "Final Debriefing, Moore, PFC" stared up at her. Never filed, never forgotten. The rain kept falling outside, but inside, something was finally beginning to rise. Everyone has a trigger word. Mine? Honor. Especially when spoken by those who don't deserve it. The hallway at Fort Sterling was nearly empty. Fluorescent lights hummed, casting dull reflections along the polished floor. The scent of burnt coffee clung to the air, mingling with a metallic tang of tension. Claire's boots echoed down the corridor like the ticking of a countdown clock. Outside, rain peppered the windows in soft arrhythmic taps, but inside, everything was taut. Too still. Sergeant Monroe found her first. He wasn't in uniform, just sweatpants and a hoodie fresh from the barracks gym, but the look in his eyes had nothing to do with workouts. "You're on a list," he said, skipping any preamble. Claire stopped mid-step. "What list?" "Reassignment. Administrative. Quiet transfer out of internal affairs." The name's handwritten. Guess whose signature was floating near it? Her pulse didn't spike. Not yet. But her voice cooled. "Ryan." Monroe nodded. Claire didn't ask for proof. She didn't need it. 10 minutes later, she was outside Captain Ross's office. The door creaked open under her fist. Ross looked up from a mess of folders and digital files, eyes narrowing. "You should knock," he said. "I'll apologize after you tell me if it's true," she snapped. "Am I being reassigned?" Ross sighed, leaning back in his chair. He tried. The paperwork came through the back channel. Marked you as a conflict of interest, claimed emotional instability due to sibling entanglement. Claire blinked slowly, rage sharpening like a blade. "He called me unstable?" "He implied it. He also referenced your personal vendetta and unfounded bias." "And you?" Claire asked. "I flagged it, sent it back as premature, told command any reassignment would jeopardize the silent inquiry already in motion." She nodded once. Tight. "Thank you," Ross shrugged. "Don't thank me yet. That stunt made your name louder." Claire was already turning away.
She didn't run. She walked, straight through the training wing, through rows of metal doors and blinking status boards, until she reached the glass-paneled room where Ryan stood like a monarch, flanked by junior officers. He wore his rank like a tailored coat, hands behind his back, voice measured. When he saw her, he smirked. Claire didn't wait for silence. "Major Madison," she said loudly enough that the room's chatter died on cue. He turned. "Captain," he replied, eyes gleaming. "Something I can do for you?" "You already did," she said. "You prove my point." His smile faltered. She stepped into the room, her voice steady, cold steel beneath velvet. "You tried to have me moved, discredited, quietly swept under the rug like one of your bad press nights." Ryan's jaw flexed. "Watch your tone." "Oh, I am," she said. "Every syllable is chosen." I whirled around them. The officers had fallen into frozen silence. Monroe had appeared near the door. Even Captain Ross stood in the back, arms crossed, unreadable. And then, Lieutenant Hawke. Against the wall, hands folded. His expression gave nothing. Claire moved closer. "You can outrank me," she said, voice low but cutting. "But you'll never outrun what's coming." For a beat, no one spoke. A drop of rain slid down the glass like punctuation. Then Claire turned and walked out, spine unbent, shoulders square. As she passed the threshold, she heard Ryan's voice behind her, soft but laced with venom. "Then let's bring it all to the surface." She didn't stop. She didn't need to. The match was lit. The room was full of kindling. And Claire Madison had no plans to burn quietly. He once said I'd never earn his salute. Now he stands before me in full dress, waiting for mine. The brass band struck its final chord, a bright, over-rehearsed fanfare that rang off the stone walls of Fort Sterling's courtyard. Flags rippled in the hot June wind. The air carried a perfume of new sweat, polished boots, and clipped rehearsals. Claire stood in her dress uniform, the medals on her chest catching the sun in sharp glints. Her gloves were white, immaculate. Her spine was a rod of steel. Around her, the crowd had fallen into a hush. Officers, cadets, local dignitaries, and a few trailing media personnel holding up phones with practiced discretion. Ryan Madison stood across from her, chest puffed, chin high. Major, honoree of the day, the man of the hour. His medals were heavier, his row of ribbons thicker. But Claire noticed the stiffness in his shoulders, the way his eyes flicked, just once, to the table where Ross, Monroe, and Elijah sat like judges in civilian clothes. Colonel Hastings stepped forward. His voice, polished by decades of command, echoed as he announced the ceremonial lead. "Captain Claire Madison will now commence presentation." A flicker passed across Ryan's face. Claire met his eyes without blinking. She approached the podium. Each step cracked crisply over the speakers. Her voice, when it came, was calm and void of flourish. "Major Ryan Madison, having completed distinguished service under Operations Titan Shield and Barricade Storm, and for exemplary record in unit cohesion and strategic innovation, is hereby commended." She recited every word with military precision. No tremor, no theatrics. The only betrayal was the pause, half a second, before she said the name. Ryan Madison. It rang out like a name carved into stone. Ryan's jaw clenched. Claire stepped down and turned to face him. The silence stretched like canvas over a battlefield. Protocol dictated the honoree return salute to the ceremonial officer. It was procedural, standard, meaningless, unless history soaked it in gasoline. Ryan hesitated,
Every soldier in the courtyard saw it. Cameras clicked. Colonel Hastings narrowed his eyes. Ross gave nothing away. Claire didn't flinch. Ryan lifted his right hand. The motion was stiff, deliberate, the kind of salute that tried to look mechanical but couldn't hide its reluctance. His fingers reached temple height, wrist rigid. Claire returned it in perfect form. They held it for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then, simultaneously, they lowered. The brass struck up again, but the moment had already been framed by cameras, by eyes, by every soul who knew even a hint of their story. Claire turned slightly toward him, and only he could hear her voice, pitched for one set of ears alone. "There's a file on your desk. Read it before midnight." Ryan blinked. Just once. She walked away before he could respond. Behind her, the event continued. Photos, applause, handshakes. But the center of gravity had shifted. Ryan stood alone under the flag, sunlight catching the sweat at his collar. Claire didn't linger. By the time most guests had filtered out, she was already back in her office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The file labeled "Transfer Request Captain C. Madison" sat atop her desk, unsigned. She opened the folder slowly, as if it were a relic from another war. Then she reached for the keyboard, her fingers hovering briefly. Delete. Gone. She exhaled. On her side table, a plain manila envelope sat sealed, the one she had slid into Ryan's inbox that morning. The label read only 2 words: legacy adjustment. I handed in the report like a soldier, but the woman inside me, she waited to see his world burn. The air conditioning hummed overhead, more intrusive than cooling. Fort Sterling's command hall smelled like old oak polish and fresh paper, a strange blend of history and bureaucracy. Rows of chairs lined the paneled walls, filled with officers in stiff uniforms, rank gleaming under the fluorescent lights. No one spoke unless prompted. Eyes forward, hands folded, faces unreadable. Colonel Hastings adjusted his glasses as I stepped to the center of the room, the weight of the black binder firm in my hands. "Captain Madison," he said without emotion, "you may proceed." I laid the file down like it was a weapon. "This report contains documented infractions committed by Major Ryan Madison over a span of 6 years, I began, voice steady. Hazing incidents, falsified witness statements, evidence suppression, and verbal abuse within command hierarchy. Ryan sat directly across from me, not in his usual swaggering pose, but upright, calculating, his uniform flawless as always. To his left, Captain Ross sat with arms crossed, jaw tight. To the right, a row of officers with stern nameplates and years of medals eyed the binder like it might hiss. The first page revealed the hazing case from Fort Grant. I flipped it deliberately. Incident 402A, 3 soldiers admitted to being subjected to sleep deprivation and physical threats during initiation rites. 1 sustained a concussion. Their original statements were filed, then later replaced. Colonel Hastings frowned. Replaced. I nodded. Same timestamps, same formatting, different language. Sanitized, reworded, tracked through a backdated credential logged under Major Madison's ID. Ryan leaned forward, voice icy. "That is circumstantial. You know the chaos of internal logging. Anyone could have—" I raised a hand, not to interrupt, but to signal I wasn't done. "Elijah Price, formally reassigned after flagging this incident, provided corroborating data. Server logs, access keys." I paused. "And one more thing. From the side table, Ross queued up an audio file." Hawk didn't look up. He sat at the far edge of the room, sleeves rolled, arms resting on his knees like he wanted to vanish. But his face was stone. The speakers crackled, then Ryan's voice emerged, unmistakable. "You're nothing if you can't cover for me, Hawk." Silence. Not the stunned kind, the tight-lipped, can't blink kind. Ryan's chair creaked as he turned, expression unreadable. "That recording is out of context." Ross didn't even flinch. And yet, remarkably clear. Colonel Hastings closed the file slowly. His fingers tapped twice against the thick binder before he looked up. "Major Madison," he said, "you are hereby placed on temporary suspension, pending formal hearing procedures. Turn in your sidearm and ID badge to security within the hour." I exhaled slowly. Nothing dramatic, just breath escaping a locked rib cage. Ryan didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared as if trying to see something beneath my skin. The session adjourned in silence. Chairs scraped, papers gathered. No applause, no acknowledgments, just the sound of polished shoes tapping down a long hall. Outside the chamber, the sunlight was blinding. I walked toward the side corridor, aware of every movement behind me. Every breath I took felt like my lungs were tasting freedom for the first time. I had expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt clean, scrubbed raw. Ryan's voice reached me before his presence did. "You think this is over?" I turned slowly. He stood beneath the archway, his shadow stretching too far for comfort. "No," I said, and didn't raise my voice. "I think you've only just begun to feel invisible." He always wears the uniform like armor. Now, stripped of it, he's just a man with too many lies and nowhere to hide. The press conference room hummed with static tension. Overhead fluorescents buzzed faintly, casting a sterile sheen over polished insignias and sweat-beaded brows. Rows of metal chairs filled fast, press badges pinned like warning signs. Cameras blinked red in anticipation, eager to consume whatever narrative command would serve. Claire stood behind the side door, her dress uniform immaculate, arms crossed loosely but eyes sharp. From this angle, she couldn't see the entire podium, but she didn't need to. She wasn't here to watch Ryan fall. She was here to witness the institution finally admit it let him rise unchecked. A week ago, this room would have bent around his gravity, but now, stripped of ceremony, stripped of protocol, Ryan stood isolated beneath a single banner bearing the Army's crest, a thin line of brass behind him. He wasn't giving orders today. Command spokesperson Major Ellis approached the microphone with a folder in hand. His voice, when it came, was clipped and clean. "Effective immediately, the Department of the Army has suspended Major Ryan Madison's scheduled promotion. A formal inquiry has been opened regarding conduct violations, including but not limited to falsified records, abuse of command authority, and interference with internal investigations." A flicker of movement behind the curtain. Claire didn't blink. The room reacted like a struck chord. Pens scratched paper. Reporters leaned forward, half standing, flashbulbs strobed. Then Ryan stepped forward, his tie tight, collar stiff, face dredged in something between disdain and disbelief. "These claims," he began. But Ellis didn't look at him. He didn't need to. "These claims," Ellis repeated, "are supported by multiple internal reports, eyewitness statements, and audio documentation provided through proper military channels. This is no longer a matter of speculation. This is a matter of record." Claire felt something shift. Not triumph exactly, more like an exhale she'd held for years. Ryan tried again, louder this time. "This was personal."
And then the reply. Cold, measured, final, and you made it institutional. The silence that followed was the loudest noise Claire had ever heard. 1,000 lenses pivoted at once. No one moved. Ellis gave no further comment, just closed the folder with a click that might as well have echoed off marble. Claire watched as Ryan's face collapsed inward, not in panic, not even rage. Just the dawning recognition that the performance was over, and no encore was coming. The lights wouldn't follow him out. The cameras wouldn't spin him a softer ending. Across the room, near the back, a figure lifted a phone. Ortiz, in uniform. She didn't call attention to herself, didn't nod or wave, just held the phone up and snapped a single photo. Claire in profile, half hidden, perfectly still. The room began to fracture into noise. Reporters murmuring, chairs scraping, flashes flaring again. But Claire stayed frozen in the silence between shutter clicks. Her breathing stayed even. The urge to walk away was strong, but the moment needed its full breath. She had waited too long to rush this. She finally stepped through the doorframe, the press now aware of her presence. A few eyes caught her movement, gasps surfacing, recorders redirected. She didn't seek the mic. She didn't need it. "Captain Madison," a reporter barked. "Do you have a statement?" She paused. The weight of years behind her, the record, the real one, finally cracking through. "Let the record speak louder than I ever could." And she walked off the stage, no salute, no backward glance, only the sound of justice at last unfolding. Justice is loud when it hits, but its echoes, that's what really changes people. The late afternoon light filtered through the stained glass windows of Fort Sterling's chapel, casting streaks of blue and crimson across the rows of solemn uniforms. The quiet murmur of shuffling boots faded as the last soldier took their seat. Claire stood alone near the altar, one hand resting gently on the edge of the podium, the other gripping a small silver object nestled in her pocket, Derek's dog tag. She didn't clear her throat or wait for attention. The silence was already hers. "We stand here not to glorify loss," she began, voice steady, "but to remember those who gave more than their names on a plaque." The words weren't rehearsed. They came like breath, slow, measured, true. She spoke of PFC Derek Moore, his relentless optimism, the way he had cracked jokes during the worst drills and shared rations even when he had none to spare. She named 2 others, soldiers from her former patrol unit, whose records had gone overlooked in the shuffle of bureaucracy. Each name landed like a quiet percussion against the pews, steady as a heartbeat. When she stepped back, no applause followed, only silence. And in that silence, Claire felt the weight of something shift. Not lifted, not released, but integrated, a part of her now. As she returned to her seat, Monroe stood in the aisle. He didn't say anything at first, just placed a warm, calloused hand on her shoulder and held it there longer than formality allowed. "He'd be proud, you know," he said, his voice gruff with restraint. Claire nodded but didn't reply. Pride wasn't what she sought. She had stopped needing that long ago. Later, after the room had emptied and only soft piano music remained, Ortiz approached from the back. She wasn't in uniform, just a pressed button-down, sleeves rolled. She carried no camera this time, only curiosity. "Why didn't you go public?" she asked, standing beside Claire near the memorial wall. Claire traced the edge of the brass plaque. "Some stories need to be heard in silence." Ortiz considered that for a beat. Even when they're true? Especially when they are. They stood like that for a while, watching the shadows stretch along the floor as the sun dipped behind the tree line. Finally, Claire reached into her pocket and pulled out Derek's tag. It was warm from her skin, the lettering worn but intact. She stepped forward and found the empty hook waiting beneath the new section of the wall. Her hand lingered longer than most, thumb brushing over the metal, not in hesitation, but in recognition. This wasn't closure. It wasn't redemption. It was continuity. The tag clicked into place. A single sound in the stillness, like a bell in the distance. Behind her, Monroe and Ortiz remained silent. No one needed to say anything. The echo was loud enough. As she turned to leave, Hastings passed her in the aisle, offering the faintest nod. It wasn't a salute, but it was acknowledgement. On the way out, Claire stopped by her office to grab her cap. The light on her desk phone blinked twice. Missed call, no message. Beside it, someone had slid an envelope under the door. She bent down, picked it up, and opened it carefully. Reassignment request. Her eyes scanned the header, the emblem, the ink still sharp and formal. Captain Claire Madison, Instructor, Officer Ethics and Leadership Academy. Provisional start date, August 15th, 2021. She folded the letter slowly and slipped it into her bag. No smile, no sigh, just a quiet nod. Legacy, she thought. Not inherited, earned. I never expected forgiveness, just clarity. But sometimes, clarity is a form of mercy. The Madison house hadn't changed much. Same gravel, crunch beneath the tires, same peeling paint on the shutters. Claire stepped out of the rental car and paused at the porch steps. A wind chime tinkled softly above, out of tune. She knocked once, twice, then opened the door herself. Inside, everything smelled like lemon wood polish and dusted denial. The hallway held its usual rows of family photos. Ryan in dress blues, Ryan at graduation, Ryan holding a plaque. Claire's picture sat lower, smaller, wedged behind a decorative lamp, as if it might embarrass someone. Claire? Patricia's voice floated in from the kitchen, soft, wary. Claire stepped in, boots brushing over the hardwood floor. Hi, Mom. No hug, no warmth, just a glance and the shuffle of utensils into a drawer. We weren't sure if you'd really come. I almost didn't, Claire admitted, scanning the room. A bowl of fruit sat perfectly arranged, untouched. From the living room, Frank emerged, wiping his hands on a dish towel like he'd just manufactured a reason to join. How's the weather in Fort Sterling, right? Claire nodded. Stormy this week. Fitting, he chuckled, weak. Heard you were promoted. It wasn't a promotion, it was recognition. Silence stretched thin. Claire looked at the family clock, still ticking just loud enough to avoid the weight of quiet. Frank cleared his throat and gestured toward the old recliner. Sit a minute? She didn't. Instead, she leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Let's skip the weather. Frank hesitated, then said, Did it feel worth it? Claire blinked. Ask Derek's mother. The name landed like a dropped dish in the middle of a dinner table. Patricia paused mid-polish, lowering the glass in her hands. Frank's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Claire pulled something from her coat pocket, a small, simple box. She opened it and took out a framed medal. She walked to the shelf under Ryan's trophies and placed it beside them. It was mine, she said evenly. You never asked.
Patricia turned away, pressing her fingers to her mouth. The tears didn't fall, but the shame thickened the air.
Claire looked around once more. The faded couch cushions, the worn rug, the family photos that smiled without knowing better. She didn't belong here. Maybe she never had. She reached for the doorknob.
Wait,
Patricia said.
Claire stopped but didn't turn.
Ryan's not coming back.
Claire stared at the wood grain of the door. Neither am I, she replied.
But I don't leave angry.
She stepped outside into the late July sun, its rays warm but distant. The sky held no clouds, just open space. A figure leaned against the car. Ortiz straightened, flipping closed a battered notebook. Thought you might need company for the drive back. Claire smiled, barely. Guess I do. She opened the driver's door and slid in as Ortiz rounded the car. Behind them, the Madison house stayed still, small in the mirror. Claire didn't look back again. My name's no longer behind his shadow. It's written on the door, next to the word, instructor. The hallway was still, washed in the soft gold of an early August morning. The academy building smelled faintly of chalk and varnish, old institutions learning how to breathe new air. Claire stood in front of the classroom door a moment before entering. Her nameplate gleamed beside the handle. Captain Claire Madison, faculty. She touched it once with 2 fingers, then stepped inside. The cadets were already seated. Some whispered among themselves, others stared forward, eager or uncertain. 22 faces. 22 new beginnings. Claire placed her folder on the desk and turned toward the whiteboard. She picked up a marker and paused, scanning the room. Not for attention, but for presence. Today's topic, she began. What does rank cost? Chairs shifted, eyebrows lifted. Someone clicked a pen nervously. From the back, a familiar voice cut the quiet. Depends who's holding it. Claire turned slightly. Ortiz leaned back in her seat, arms crossed, an amused glint in her eye. A few cadets looked between them, unsure whether to laugh. Claire offered a tight nod and wrote 3 words across the whiteboard. Respect, not fear. The room hushed. She stepped beside the board. You've all been trained to follow orders, but this class isn't about obedience. It's about ownership. What do you owe to the rank you wear? And what do you lose if you wear it wrong? A cadet raised his hand hesitantly. Ma'am, is this about the hearings last month? Claire let the question hang, then responded evenly. This is about leadership. The hearings were a consequence. Another hand shot up. Ortiz again. Ma'am, do you think we'll ever know the whole truth about what happened? Claire met her eyes. Behind the question wasn't gossip. It was something more complex. Inheritance. She considered her answer. Only the part that matters, and you're standing in it. A long pause followed, weighted and quiet. A few cadets scribbled notes, others leaned back, reflecting. Claire turned to the board again and flipped the page on the easel beside it. In neat letters, she wrote the next lesson title, Saluting with Integrity. Pens clicked, notebooks opened. The class leaned forward, outside the flag lifted slightly in the breeze. Justice wasn't loud anymore. It was lived. The shadow of betrayal no longer loomed over her steps. It had faded beneath the weight of exposed truths and irreversible consequences. What once began as quiet injustice inside a household ended in the rupture of an entire institution's silence. Like a steel thread woven through fire, justice held, scarred but unbroken. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. If this story resonated with you, like, share, and leave a comment. Type 1 if you felt her struggle, or 2 if you still wanted more from her reckoning.